It is February 12th, 2025. We're going to talk about and tap for productivity. Welcome to Wednesdays with Gene. I am the eponymous Gene Monterastelli. Every single week we get together. We talk about ways that we can use tapping to integrate it in our lives to create the authentic lives that we want. These live streams every single Wednesday are sponsored by the Tapping Mastery Academy, which gives you an opportunity to dive much deeper into your tapping skill set. So you're not just getting the basic recipe to create some change, but you're actually integrating tapping into your life in lots and lots of ways. As always, before we jump in, what we want to do is we just want to ground ourselves. We just want to put ourselves in our body. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a minute and a half of wordless tapping. And so what I want you to do is just tap on the side of the hand, take a nice big deep breath. And for the next 90 seconds, just move from point to point in the order that makes the most sense for you and the speed that most makes sense for you. Also, don't forget to breathe. Nice big stretch. If any ideas came bubbling into your head, jot those down. If you need a sip of water, certainly reach for one of those. Oh, feels so good to ground ourselves in that way. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about tapping for productivity. And this is something I give a lot of thought to. One of the biggest changes that ever came in my life was starting to tap for productivity. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So what I want to do is I actually want to run through with you 4 really simple ways that you can introduce tapping into your daily life to help you to be more productive. So number 1 is to look at and see if there is any emotional resistance to becoming more productive. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but very often when we commit to new things, when we start to create change, the subconscious mind resists that. And that's because our subconscious mind will choose the predictably bad over the unpredictable. That's how much it wants to be in control, because predictable means manageable, and manageable means safe. So even if it's painful, even if it's not working the way that we want, it's going to want to stay in that particular spot because change is so different. Now, last week, what we talked about in the live stream was we talked about the tapping grid. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this right now. If you'd like to download the tapping grid, if you'd like to see the entire 25-minute training on the tapping grid, all you need to do is go to tappingqanda.com/grid and you'll get access to last week's video and the little guide that I've printed out for you to do this. But at a high level, this is basically giving us a chance to look through 4 lenses in 4 settings or 4 contexts. So safe, allowed, worthy, deserve, and the contexts are wanting to do it, doing it, being seen doing it, maintain doing it. So with productivity, is it safe for me to want productivity? Wanting productivity is not safe because all of a sudden the standards will be raised. All of a sudden they're going to expect this of me all of the time. I'm going to have to face other things because I'm going to get things done quicker. And so going through and using the tapping grid or anything else to unearth what are the emotional resistances to you taking action. Because if there is any emotional resistance at all to you taking action, in this case, being productive with your action, your subconscious mind is going to make sure that no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to take action. So it sees it as a way of keeping us safe, even though it is absolutely not keeping us safe. So, when you want to create change in your life, like being more productive or anything else, the first thing that we always want to do is what is the emotion I have about where I am right now, about not being productive in this case, and what is the emotion I have about what will happen if I am productive? What will happen if I'm seen being productive? What will happen if I claim to want to be productive? Because if there's any emotional resistance in any of that, it's going to slow you down. And it doesn't matter what tools, what techniques, what approaches you use. If you don't get yourself emotionally clear about achieving the goal, then it doesn't matter. You can have all of the planners and all of the to-do lists and all of the accountability buddies that you can want and still be in a circumstance where you're not actually going to take action if it doesn't feel safe for you to take those actions. So, number one, get yourself emotionally clear about being productive. Number two is the way that I tap for my to-do list. And this transformed my life. I wish I had access to them now, but there was a point that I could look at my traffic to my website, to tappingqanda, and if you looked at that graph, you could tell when I started tapping for productivity. Because it wasn't like all of a sudden there was this gentle upswing. There was literally this giant wall, this giant cliff that jumped straight up, because as I became productive, what was happening is I was doing really valuable tasks like joint venturing and reaching out and inviting people to my site. And so my traffic went up because I was taking more action. Now, it's not just about taking action for us to be productive. In order for me to be productive, I need to be doing the right action at the right time in the right way. And one of the foundations that I work from is this idea that we will always do the emotionally safe task that is the highest value. So the highest value task that is emotionally safe is the one that I'm going to reach for first. But the problem, or the reality is the tasks that are really high value for me are also the tasks that have really high stakes, thus the reason why they have value. And since the stakes are high, it might not necessarily feel emotionally safe for me to do. So if I'm not doing any tapping in the way I engage with what's in front of me, then I'm going to be in a circumstance where the highest value task that is emotionally safe is not the highest value task on my to-do list. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a lot of time in that middle third of my to-do list. The way I engage with my day is I often think that, the top 3 most valuable items on my to-do list on any given day are more valuable than the rest of my to-do list. But because they're so valuable, I steer clear of them. So even though they're sitting on the list, they're less likely to get done. So I end up being really, really busy. I get lots of things done, but I'm not necessarily being productive because I'm not doing the most valuable things. So there's a really simple process that I use to do this is I get out my to-do list and I read the first task on my to-do list. Do it every single morning, sitting here at the desk, take a nice big deep breath. I tune in and I imagine myself doing that task. And as I imagine myself doing that task, I pay attention to see if there's any resistance. So let's say I want to invite someone to joint venture with me. And as I tune in to sending them that email, I feel some tightness in my solar plexus. So there's some resistance. So if there's resistance, I ask the resistance 2 questions. What are you afraid of? And what proof do you have that we should be afraid of this thing? So as I tune into sending that email, it's like, oh, they're going to say no and I'm going to lose opportunities. They're going to say no and I'm going to feel dumb and stupid. They're going to say no and I'm going to feel judged. And so it's really important to recognize that if I feel those things, I am not going to take those particular actions. So what I do is, again, imagine myself taking the action, feel the resistance. What's it afraid of? What proof does it have? Now, sometimes that second question, what proof does it have? There isn't going to be any information. If there is, we now have stuff to tap on. So we now know the emotion And we might have some of the proof, which gives us the ability to tap and to create change. So I imagine doing that first thing. I notice the resistance. I clear the resistance. I move on to the next task. Now, the next task, as I tune into it, there might be no resistance to it at all. Great. If there's no resistance, I go to the third task. I imagine myself doing it. If there's resistance, I tack on it. So as I work my way through the entire to-do list, I'm going to tap on every single thing that has resistance. So now I'm in a circumstance where there's no longer emotional resistance to anything. So if I am going to do the highest value task that feels safe, at the moment, everything on the to-do list feels safe. Therefore, I'm going to do everything on the to-do list. So it makes it so much easier for me to sit down and do that particular thing. Now, when I first started doing this, I created emotional safety for about 90 minutes. But because I did those 3 high-value tasks in that 90 minutes, it didn't matter if the fear came rushing back because I was now working on the things that felt safe. So a really super easy way to be productive is to tap on your to-do list at the beginning of the day. Number 3. There we go. Number 3. Number 3 for me is making sure that I'm consistently tapping for overwhelm throughout the day. So the way that this might look, I might not do this every single day, but when I'm dealing with overwhelm's going to get in the way of my productivity because I'm not going to want to engage with the things that feel impossible for me to do. The emotion of overwhelm is saying that I don't have the resources to do this, either the time, the energy, the skill, whatever it is. And my subconscious mind doesn't want me to fail. So it's going to make sure I don't start tasks that are too overwhelming for me to save me from failing. So the way this works is when I feel overwhelmed, I look at my to-do list, I feel a whole bunch of overwhelm, and I just take 30 seconds and tap. I recognize the fact that right now I feel really overwhelmed about what is in front of me. And I give myself permission to know if I take these tasks one at a time, they will get done. My system thinks I'm trying to do everything all at once, and I give my system permission to know not only am I not doing everything all at once, I'm actually doing it in a way that is easy and manageable, so it'll all get done. Take a deep breath. Overwhelm goes down enough for me to engage in the next task. Now for me, when I'm engaged in the next task, I am so locked in on what is going on, I forget about everything that's on the to-do list. So the overwhelm's not there. Now the moment the task is over and I look back at the to-do list, it's very likely that instead of having 19 things on my to-do list, I now have 18 things on my to-do list. The overwhelm is still there. So it comes rushing forward once again. I tap for overwhelm. I do the next task. So what I'm doing all day long on a day that I'm overwhelmed, and again, I only do this when I'm feeling overwhelmed, but on a day that I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have a deadline, I might tap 19 times over the course of the day for overwhelm. And what that does is that sets me up because every single time I engage in a tool, it makes it so much, or a task, it makes it so much easier for me to engage with it because I am present. And then finally, number 4 is what I call 15-1 tapping. Whenever I am working on something that is creative, typically I work on creative tasks for chunks of time that are between 30 and 90 minutes, just because that's how much creative space I have to get things done. So working on new programs, scripts for videos, writing emails, whatever those things are that I'm working on that take creativity. Now, what happens is when we are creative is we are spending energy. And as we spend energy, at a certain point, we become less good because we've spent so much energy. I'm sure you know what it's like to be sitting there to do something and all of a sudden you feel really woolly-brained, or you feel really stuck, or you feel really resistant inside of all of that. And so what happens is as we are working, our energy is slowly going down, and it's slowly going down. And as it goes down, we get worse and worse at what we're doing. And at a certain point, we go, oh my gosh, I'm tired. I need to stretch. I need to get up and do something. Now, if I am waiting for myself to recognize the fact that this is the thing that is bubbling up, that I'm too tired, then I've spent a chunk of time where I have been working in a suboptimal way. So the way that I solve that is I do 15-1 tapping, which means that I work for 15 minutes and then I tap for 1 minute. So I set a timer on my watch for 15 minutes and I start working along. And after about 15 minutes, the alarm goes off. So I stop and I tap for 1 minute, which gets me back to being fully resourced. And then as I'm working for another 15 minutes, it's diminishing, but the alarm goes off and I tap. So it's happening because I'm never getting way down here where I'm working in a less optimal way. And I have found when I'm doing this, because I keep resetting my resource state, it is so much easier for me to work for a longer period of time because I'm always working from a place that is fresh. And working from a place that's fresh, I get more done, I get better work done, I get work done in a faster fashion. So the 15-1 tapping saves a lot of time. So 4 really, really, really simple things that you can do to help your productivity for tapping. Number 1, figure out what is the emotional resistance to me taking action, clearing the emotional resistance to being productive and getting more done. Number 2, spend some time tapping on your to-do list every single time you sit down. Could be the beginning of the day. I oftentimes do it at the beginning of the day, and then I reset my day after lunch just to make sure the afternoon's going to go well. But when you sit down to work, it's a great way when you have multiple things on your task. Number 3, if you're feeling overwhelmed, tap for overwhelm, and then tap for overwhelm. Because remember, the goal is not to get rid of the overwhelm. The goal is to get your stuff done. And if you're taking your action every single bit by bit, even if you keep tapping for overwhelm, it's going to make a huge difference. And then finally, number 4, 15-1 tapping. Work for 15 minutes, tap for 1. Work for 15 minutes, tap for 1. And when I do that, it is just a minute of wordless tapping. I set my timer for a minute and I just move from tapping point to tapping point to tapping point as my body resets, as I engage. So that is the way that we tap. Let's take a look at some of the things that we got coming up. Number 1, if you'd like to get the tapping grid that we talked about at the top of this particular episode and see the training on the tapping grid, all you need to do is go to tappingqanda.com/grid. That's tappingqanda.com/grid. Next week, we're going to be back here live. Right now, I'm in Las Vegas. That's the reason why you're getting a recording. I've been in the chat box watching with y'all. But next week, we are going to be back here live as we work our way through all of this. We're going to tap on the insights from the first 10 weeks of Wednesday with Gene over my shoulder right here. There we go. Point to the right shoulder in that little bitty vase. The insights that you guys have been dropping into the chat box, the things that are resonating with you, they are all inside of that little guy. We're going to dump them out and we're going to do so much tapping to integrate these amazingly powerful tools into what we're doing. As we go forward, if you have a topic you'd like us to cover in one of these live streams on Wednesday, drop me a note at support@tappingqanda.com. I love hearing from you. Some of the best topics for videos and podcasts and things like this have come from recommendations from people just like you. On the screen right now, you can actually see the playlist of all the past live streams that we have done. Click on that playlist, dive in, and I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon. Bye-bye.